My name is John Trey Glomset. I'm an orthopedic surgeon at OSOI SSM. I was born and raised in Oklahoma City. I went to the University of Oklahoma for undergraduate as well as for medical school. And after medical school, I moved to New Orleans where I did orthopedic residency at the Ochsner Clinic. After residency, I transitioned into active duty military service, so I was part of the United States Army for 5 years. And then afterwards, I went to fellowship at the Steadman Hawkins Clinic of the Carolinas where I did a sports medicine and shoulder reconstruction fellowship. I moved back to Oklahoma City about 2.5 years ago, and I've been in private practice here ever since. Being a physician in the military is somewhat unique in that the rank of the physician is somewhat involved really on a day-to-day basis, because you answer to somebody who's a higher ranking officer than you and so forth, and that may be a physician in a different field. There's a theoretical concern that that could interfere with patient care and you making the right decisions. I never encountered that. Even when I was a low-ranking officer, I was still the subject matter expert in orthopedic surgery unless there was a higher-ranking orthopedic surgeon. So that never really became an issue. That was not, there's definitely a theoretical risk of that, but I've never seen that happen. Finances in the military are significantly different than in the civilian world or in private practice. So you're paid based on your rank and then based on the years that you've had in the service. So on average, you're going to be making a significantly lower salary than you would be making if you were in private practice. That can be anywhere from 1/10 to maybe 1/3 of what you would be making if you were in private practice in the same communities. After finishing residency, some residents go to fellowship at that time. Some people decide to go into private practice. A few of us go into private practice or into the military practice and then go back to fellowship. And so I did that. I went to fellowship after I'd been out of residency for 5 years. The fellowship I chose is 1 extra year of training. One of the interesting things about choosing the military to practice medicine in is that you lose some control of your career. And that when I finished residency, there was no option for a fellowship. It was that I had to immediately transition to active duty service and practice as a general orthopedic surgeon for a time period before I could go back to fellowship. There are some exceptions to that, but that's kind of a general rule. It's called a utilization tour, where you finish residency, the military wants to utilize you, and so they station you and have you start practicing as a general surgeon. The promotion system in the military is almost independent of whether or not you're a physician or not. It has to do with time in the service, it has to do with different evaluations, and it also has to do with different courses that you go through. So at different levels, you have to go through different classes, or different courses is what they call them, to get promoted. And so as a physician, it's really dependent upon your time in service. It's not so much based on what you have and what you haven't done. It's just, okay, I've been in the military for 4 years. It's time to get promoted from captain to major and so forth. I joined the military after college, before medical school, under something called an HPSB scholarship. So that's a scholarship set up by the military to pay for your medical school in addition, or in exchange for a certain number of years. And so they have 4-year scholarships. They also have 3-year scholarships. So if they pay for medical school for 4 years, you owe them 4 years of time. You can do 3 years as a minimum. I joined the military. I was in college during 9/11. I wanted to join the military straight out. My parents had a different idea. And once I got into medical school, I was still wanting to join the military. So I reached out to the military and started looking at different options. And then I was presented with that option for a scholarship. I think it was a good option for me because I wanted to be in the military. But if you don't want to be in the military and you're doing it just as a way to get medical school paid for, it is a really bad option. It's a bad option because your heart isn't in it. You know, if you're in the military, you have to want to be there. You have to feel like you are a part of a bigger purpose. And if you don't feel that and you're just there to get your loans paid for, you are going to be miserable for whatever time period that you committed to. Joining the military makes sense financially if you're going to go into primary care. If you're going to do any of the specialties based on just some math, simple math, you'll find out that you would be better off financially to actually most likely take out the student loans and pay them off, because your salary in civilian world is going to be so much higher than it is in the military. And so if you're a specialist, that's a no-brainer. There's no way that you're going to end a career in the military, even if it's just 4 years, where you're ahead of the game, where you made more money by getting your loans paid for. And there are obviously some exceptions to that. So if you go to a private medical school, the numbers may work out where it may be equal or even to join the military and have your loans paid for. But if not, if you go to a public school or a school that's not very expensive, the chances that you end up financially behind as a specialist are very high. Join the military, if you want to join the military, is a great idea. If you're joining the military just to get your medical school paid for, that is not, in my opinion, that is not a very good idea. And I did not see very many people who were happy with that decision. The people who I saw that were happy joining the military as physicians were people who wanted to be there and who wanted to be in the military, whether they were going to be a physician or whether they were going to be a field artillery officer or whether or not they were going to be an infantryman. Like, those are the people who were happy. The people who were just there to have their loans paid for were not happy. So the military paid for 4 years of my medical school, so I owed them 4 years of active duty service. I worked at Fort Sill, which is in Lawton, Oklahoma. I also worked at Fort Bragg, which is in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And at both of those places, I was stationed at Fort Sill for 5 years, and about half that time I spent at Fort Bragg, actually. So when you're in the military, you are paid solely based on a salary. So it does not matter how many surgeries you do. It does not matter what your production is. You get paid the same no matter what you do. For somebody who's going to join the military, although you're not making more money by being busy, it's important to be busy because you're right out of residency. It's an important time to learn and kind of hone in some of the skills that you just learned. So it's really important to be busy. And again, don't worry about the money. Don't worry about how much production you have. Don't worry about whether or not it's worth it. Just work on taking care of people and be as busy as you can, because that is such an important time to learn the skills that you've been taught in residency. So in the military, you don't have any say in your staff. You don't have a say in your staffing. You don't have a say really in much. Most of those things are determined for you. You do have some say in your clinic schedule and the volume and what you can and can't do, but you don't have a say in who runs your practice or who's your nurse or who's your cast tech or any of those things. Of course, you have some say in their evaluations, and if you need to, you could probably make some changes, but it's not nearly as easy as private practice. When you're working in the military, you kind of end up in two different situations. One is that you may be seeing patients on post at the military hospital, and then also operating on them at that same hospital. The more common scenario is that you have a clinic at the hospital where you see those military patients, but you actually have to do their surgeries at the civilian hospital. The military has discovered that it's cheaper to actually outsource those surgeries to the community than doing them in their own hospital. So it's cheaper than having to run a hospital and keep a hospital maintained. During my military career, I also was able to develop a moonlighting practice. And so my moonlighting practice was 1 day a week, at which time I would take leave from the military and I would go over and see clinic at a civilian hospital. Those are the civilian patients that I would then operate on in the civilian hospital as well. And that was really nice because in the military, you kind of get stuck with the same demographic of patients in terms of age and usually sex too, where it's the same pathology, and you see that over and over and over again. So my moonlighting experience allowed me to see more of what a regular orthopedic surgeon would see. More people, older people with arthritis or females with shoulder or hip problems versus just the same, 18 to 25-year-old male with the same type of problems. The thing I enjoyed the absolute most about working in the military and on the military base was the patients, because most of them are soldiers that have decided to join the military. They are motivated, they are healthy, they are wanting to get better. And taking care of them it's number one, it's easy, and number two, it was a lot of fun, and it was also really nice to see younger people who really wanted to take care of their country, and taking care of them was a pleasure. Some of the harder parts of working on the military base was dealing with the bureaucracy of a large institution like the United States Army. There's a lot of red tape on simple things, and just like in any organization, it gets harder the larger the organization gets. So that was definitely the hardest part. Some of the most important things I learned in the military was how to manage a practice. And so being in the military, you kind of in a situation where there aren't any financial consequences of not being as efficient or not being as busy. And so it taught me those skills to learn how to be more efficient, to be able to manage a larger practice, to manage a larger volume of patients in clinic, so that when I got out, that was kind of a seamless transition. If you do that right out of residency in private practice, you may end up losing money, losing production, losing patients. It's a little bit different in the military because you don't really have, those patients don't necessarily have another choice. There are a lot of politics working as a military physician. There are politics just on the local level, and then there are also obviously larger politics. You got to realize that there's so much more to working for the military than just being a physician. So you're obviously a physician, but you're also a military officer first, and that comes with a set of responsibilities and duties, and that can vary from minimal to a lot. The other thing that they need to be reminded of is that you are still a soldier, and so you are going to get deployed. You're going to go to places that you may not want to go, and you don't really have a say in that. And so you have to be comfortable with that, and you have to be comfortable knowing that there's some aspect of your life that you don't have any control over. So during my time, I deployed 4 times. I deployed a couple times to Afghanistan, once to Africa, and then finally to Iraq. And those deployments were great. I wouldn't change them for the world. But that was me. That's what I wanted to do. So again, if you are in the military and you're not really wanting to be there, those would have been terrible trips. Those would have been terrible times. So I transitioned from the military straight into fellowship. So I didn't go into private practice. I had this year buffer to really focus on sports medicine and shoulder reconstruction. And that was a really nice buffer, because for that year, much like in the military, I didn't have to worry about production. I didn't have to worry about the business side of medicine. And so that kind of reoriented me back to the civilian side of medicine, and then allowed me to focus on what was important for that transition. And so transitioning from fellowship to private practice was relatively easy. But I also made sure that was a priority during fellowship, was to ask questions about, like I mentioned before, billing, coding, the important aspects of running a business, because that's what you're doing whenever you get out of fellowship and whenever you're in private practice. Yeah, I unfortunately did not learn from anything other than just experience and from mentors. I didn't have a lot of resources in terms of what I could read or what I could look at. And I think that's obviously one of the problems. Like, we finish residency and we don't get educated on the business side of medicine, but it is a huge component of our lives. In fact, if it's not run well, it overtakes your life in terms of you spend more time worrying about that than you worry about patients, and that's not a good situation for anyone. Looking back at my experiences in the military and just everything that's happened since I joined the military, I would join the military again. Again, that's my personal opinion, just because of the things that I wanted to do and the things that I desired from the military. I wouldn't change it. And it allowed me to go to fellowship in a different situation than most people. I'd already been in practice for 5 years. I had a better sense of what I can do, what I can't do, and what I needed to learn. And I think I gained a lot of information and learned things that I don't think I would have learned from fellowship if I would have just gone straight through residency and straight to fellowship. In summary, when you're considering joining the military, it is really important to really search in your heart and figure out why you're even interested in that. Are you interested in it because you want to be in the military and you want to serve your country? Or is it because you need a way to pay for medical school? And if it's because you need a way to pay for medical school, look elsewhere. There are other options there. It's still an okay option if you don't have any other options. And if you have to do it, that's fine, but know what you're getting into. If you want to serve your country, it is an excellent option. It's an excellent option for multiple reasons, but you have to want to do it. It's an excellent option because you get of the patients that you get to take care of, some of the places you get to travel to, some of the wonderful experiences that you get to have. It has defined in a lot of ways who I am, and has given me a perspective of myself, my family, the world that I would not have otherwise. And that's helped me to become a better person and obviously a better surgeon.